Welcome back to Machynlleth 4mm. In the last video we built the waiting shelter on the up platform and the buttress that it stands on. That's now in place, and in this episode we're going to be addressing the ground levels between the main running lines and the lower yard which that waiting shelter and its buttress stands within. So there's the waiting shelter and its buttress stand in place. I've now added, this is a path that comes off the up platform and slopes down into the lower yard. This is the direction that passengers exiting the main line station heading for the Corris railway would have taken. And I'm going to be addressing the ground levels. I have to apologise, it's a very sunny day and the light, even though I've got the blind shut, the light's still casting quite a shadow. So we've got the main road with the entrance to the lower goods yard coming up here. This area in front of here is going to be raised to a sort of platform level. There's a platform loading bank that goes most of the way down between these four sidings. There is embankment coming off the back of the platform there. There's a bit of stone walling at the bottom of the embankment here. There's marked out approximately where a weighbridge needs to go. So we need to blend in this sloping entrance track up to the top of the platform and down at the other end, and work out how that is going to interact with the path coming down from the up platform, as well as the weighbridge building is half sunk into the embankment. The embankment needs completing on this side, and just to add a bit of complication, there is a baseboard joint here and a baseboard joint all the way along the back of the scene in the embankment area. So this raised area here I'm going to make using Daler mount board in a similar way that you make a platform, but it's not a nice straight parallel platform. I've got to cover the whole area here with an incline coming up out of this entrance track. I think the way I'm going to do that is I've got some large A2 sheets of paper, so I'm going to put those down onto the area and trace out where I need to make some cuts in a fresh sheet of mount board. So I've taped a piece of A2, it's just flipboard paper. I need to mark out where the platform edges need to be cut. So where the paper is over the track area, if you just run your fingers along it, it gives you an impression of where the track is, and then you can run a piece of rolling stock along there with a pencil next to it to make your line as to where the platform edge is going to be. We'll do the same thing on this side as well. Now, just to check, my widest rolling stock. The one that I've had problems with fouling platforms in the past is the small prairie, and its cylinders are well within the line. Also, some of the brake vans have step boards, which also can sometimes foul things, so it's always worthwhile checking that. So that's where the width of the platform is going to be. My little way bridge is going to come up to there, and these interesting, the Cambrian used iron mink bodies filled with rocks and a set of buffers welded to the end as a pair of buffer stops, and then at lower yard. So they're going to come up to this area here. So if I just draw, so there we are. This area of grey is all cut out with mount board, and that we'll turn that into our raised loading platform area. Well, good morning. It's another modelling day. I've managed to contract some sort of lurgy overnight, so I apologise if I sound a bit croaky this morning. So yesterday we cut out the surface for the loading area, and I've also cut out a load of the strips 15mm deep, again of mount board, to create the sides and supports underneath that, and I've started cutting some tapered ones for the ends. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to stick the strips onto the sides and then create a sort of a lattice work underneath of supports. So I want the length of the platform loading bay to be sort of platform height, but sloping gently down into this this sort of entrance area here. So that will all be the 15mm high, and then we'll have to cut some down and a gentle slope for this area. So making the sloped area at the end of the platform, we've got our tapered piece. Now I don't like stopping at an edge. It's quite difficult to blend that in smoothly and without it cracking over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of chamfer the card on the undersurface so it blends in and there's a better surface area for sticking it down. So the top of the ramp I've just marked here, just roughly a little bit, so I've got a little bit of space left over there. So I've turned the card over, marked the area roughly, and then I'm just going to use a knife to just start cutting away at that area there. So we end up with a chamfered area. Seems to be the best way. The blade flat, so I'm just powering it up and backwards and forwards. Bit of mess to tidy up, but that now sits much more flushly, and there's a better surface area for the glue to adhere to the track bed. And I'm just going to make a rough cut, just a score line. The apex, so that we can just bend that slightly into our slope. So that's the sides on. I actually decided to use rocket card glue. It sets fairly quickly, rather than the hot glue gun for this bit, just because the hot glue gun has a habit of beading over the sides, and I want nice clean edges there, so I can stick some embossed plastic hard surface for the front of the platform. And just where there's joins, such as here, it's just another little, just a thing to reinforce it. Over the joins, this just needs to be rough. That bonds pretty quickly. We need to make a supporting lattice for the rest of it. Now, there's no need to waste your life measuring this accurately, so as long as you cut it sort of at right angles. Bit down there. And that's going to support that direction, and then we'll do another one. That'll support it in that direction. And you need to make a bit of support every couple of inches or so, just to make sure that the platform doesn't start sagging when you put any surface texture on, which is obviously going to involve the use of adhesives and things like that, which may cause warping. So we've moved all the way along there now, creating nice firm support for the platform surface. We've just reached the end here. I just need to glue a little bit as support for the join onto the next piece of card. And again, just using rocket glue for this. So the loading bay platform supports are all in place. We've got a nice smooth transition at this end. That's just there to weight it down. The clearance for locos is fine. And then at this end, it slopes gradually down to a smooth transition into the entrance area. I've cut out a little area to recess the weighbridge building, and again it slopes down from being sort of platform height to slightly above the track base level in this area of yard here. So the next thing to do is coat the platform faces in the embossed plastic card. I think this is Southeastern fine cast. You might correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I prefer to use in these stone faced platforms, rough cut stone, and that gives us this sort of effect here. That's on the completed mainline platform. So I've cut some 17mm wide strips for the platform facing out of the Southeastern fine cast embossed plastic. Now that is a repeating pattern on this. If you see, there's a square block every couple of inches on that, and it bugs me when it's on the finished product. So I've got a couple of files here, and I'm just going to use them to just scrape away in those square blocks. Try the round one. And I don't know whether you can see that. That's too blurred, but the effect of the square blocks has disappeared. So I'll keep doing that with all the things, and we'll get that stuck onto the platform faces. It's now time to glue on the edgings, the sides, sorry, for the platform, just using our trusty Evo stick impact adhesive. Glue it on in strips and then trim it back. As we require it. It's worth taking the time just to make sure where you make your cuts actually lines up reasonably well with the next piece, so that the joins aren't too obvious. And we'll keep on working our way around the platform. Right, while the stone facing on the platform dries on so that I can trim it down, I'm going to spend this time making some edging stones for along the edge of the platform. So I've drawn out a grid of little rectangles, 10mm by 8mm, which is a scale 2.5 by 2 foot, and just using a scribing tool, I'm going to scribe these out to size, cut them into little strips, and then they can go along the edge of the platform. Doesn't need to be too accurate to do this. There we are. So as well as a million curly pieces of plastic, we've now got a little grid to cut strips of edging tiles from. I tend to cut all the way through. There we are. These will just snap off into strips now. Now I'm just going to trim the platform at the sides flush with the edges. So that's all trimmed back nice and flush with the top of the platform surface there, so we can add some edging tiles to it. Now, as a note, I always tend to go over the end a little bit with the first one, just so that the first tile can be sort of embedded in whatever ballast or surface covering that you're going to be using around the platform. Just makes it look like the platform sits, inside the scenery rather than perched on top of it. So we're back with my faithful Evo stick. Just going to give that one a little bend there, just to make sure that it sits nicely. And you just want to overlap it by just a millimetre. Don't overlap it too much, otherwise you'll end up fouling some rolling stock on the way past. Right, so that's all of the platform preparation done. Pop a little bit there. Just pushing my widest bits of rolling stock along the side just to make sure they don't catch on anything. I don't seem to. So we'll leave that there. All remains to do is glue it down, and then next stage is to start doing the landscape and the embankment down into the yard. Right, I've given the platform edges a dry wash of paint, and the stonework's come out quite nicely. I'm now going to cover the whole area with PVA and wait the platform to dry down into it overnight. So I want basically just a nice thick coat of PVA all over the area that the platform's going to sit. It's easier than trying to put glue individually onto the supports. So here we are from the end of the day. Everything's weighted down. Stone texture is done. Haven't finished the edging stones yet. It's weighted all down in the PVA. Some of the smaller problem areas I've just pinned down. They want to pop up all the time, so I've pinned them down with some nice big drawing pins and pin down the edge as flush as I can, so it's easy to blend in with the road. So we'll leave it there for tonight. There's our little weighbridge building set into the back of the embankment with the path running behind it. And that will pop in and out because it actually crosses a baseboard joint. So what we're trying to achieve with the next phase is to extend the embankment around the buildings and the path. So embankment's going to come down here. This wall will need to continue across the baseboard joint and peter out as this slopes up into the yard. Embankment comes down, there'll be a small section of embankment tapering behind the waiting room. There's an area here that needs infilling behind the path, and that's actually stonework just underneath the level of the top of the platform surface. There is a row of 2 sleepers stacked high, creating the back of the platform area. Again, the embankment will continue in front of the path here, not going quite down as far as the track level. There's be a small area of wall which will probably peter out as we go further down. So all the embankment around the back of the platform down this level, baseboard joint here as well to deal with, all the way up to the signal box, gradually petering out. This is what I'm going to be using. This came off the back of the insulation board when I built the room. Very fortunate to get lots and lots of that, because it's quite expensive stuff to get hold of these days if you've got to buy it from new. So that's, if I remember rightly, it's about 25mm thick. These are my weapons of choice for this job. We've got a plug-in polystyrene cutter, hot wire foam cutter, a nice sharp filleting knife, and the carving knife. So starting off, I'm just going to carve out some square sections that I can use on the small section of embankment, the low section. Just mark it out with a ruler and a pencil, and then I'm just using the carving knife for this. Hot foam cutter's great, but it's a bit slow for large cuts and quite difficult to get in a straight line. Make a few of these for the lower embankment section. So now I'm just going to more accurately mark the height of the embankment. Just about see that mark. We'll cut that now. So that's about right now. So we need to cut it down to an angle, and I found the best way to do that is with the foam hot wire cutter. And it's easier to do if we cut this down into smaller segments as well, instead of trying to do it as one long piece. So with our wire cutter, I'm just going to cut an angle down. Fiddly, trying not to burn your hands. So there we are, nice angle profile bit. Fits in there perfectly. Blends in nicely with where the embankment started over there. And we'll just carry on all the way down there. I don't need to show you all that on camera. So, as I explained earlier, the embankment is sloping. There's a gradual slope down into this yard. And we've now reached a point where the height of the embankment is higher than the thickness of the foam board I'm using, so I'm going to use a slightly different method to make it. The principles are the same, but I'm going to cut lots of little squares and then cut them off at 45 degrees. So our little chunks are all in place, glued with hot glue gun, and now I can just go along here slowly with the wire cutter. A nice musical note is just the wire running along the back of the platform edge. Come on, I'll try and get it a little bit closer to the ground. And there we are. I'm going to fill this area up here, probably just with some Sculptamod. So we've now reached another tricky area where we've got a baseboard join running along here where the whole of the lower yard detaches from the layout, and a join here as well, and we want, that's the base for the footbridge and the path coming down to the chorus line. There is a wall. This looks like it's going to be a very steep bit of embankment, but there is a wall along here, so there will be a certain amount of wall, and then the embankment will come down at a sensible height. So I think first things first is we'll work out where this baseboard joint needs to be. Just shave a little bit off the back so it's sitting at an angle. A little bit more. So that's going to fit on that section okay. I'm quite happy with the wall coming to rest right at on the baseboard joint there, so this section then needs to fit in here. Again, I think I need to cut a bit away to accommodate. Turn it on would help to accommodate the path. That will fit in there on one baseboard joint. And then I need a little section here that slopes down behind. So I've glued them in place. Baseboard joints are all preserved. So we can just have a cut along here. build this corner up again with some sculptor mould. So not forgetting that we've got a baseboard joint running along here. I'm just going to use a bit of card to reinforce these edges. So again, it's just Dale mount board. Put a bit of hot glue on there. Put that in place. Same on the other. Other side. Just make sure that it's going to fit in place. And it sets. And a piece on the end here. And then yeah, it's nice and rigid now. Bit of a step there, let's tidy that up. Yeah, I'm going to start filling in some gaps in all this foam work, and I'm using, well, it's called paper mache pulp, but it's effectively off-brand sculptor mould, as one of my sons would probably put it. So it's similar stuff, just pulped paper. And I've got here some plaster of Paris. I think this has got some plaster in it, but just not enough. So I'll pour some of the plaster in. Plaster of Paris powder. Give it a good shake around. So might put a bit more plaster in with that. Just using a fork to get it into place, and then I've got a little spatula we can use for smoothing it out afterwards. So I'll just smooth it off with spatula. Worth saying at this point actually that I am going to cover the whole lot with a layer of plaster bandage anyway, so this is just filling in any gaps. So I just had to take the lower yard board off to do something, so I thought I'd just show you how that works. It slid out here. Before we put it back together, I'll just say the connectors at the other end. So I've got some cabinet makers dowels for alignment on either side here. I've got two little plates of copper clad and just a couple of brass contacts that I've knocked up that align with that to get the power into the board. And the board lines up with the dowels up there and slides effortlessly into place on this side. And then to keep everything in alignment, I've got these long bolts that line up with some bolts glued to the inside surface. Just do that again so you can see. These long bolts go through the board and line up with the board on the main part of the track, and we can just screw hold these into place. And because this is on a slight diagonal rather than being perpendicular, the board slides in and out nicely, and as you tighten the bolt up, it tightens that joint up. And similarly at this end, there's another bolt. Right, I'm going to cover the insulation board embankment now with plaster bandage. Now, I was in the lucky position that I work in a hospital, and theatres were doing a stop check and discovered that 2 of their boxes of plaster bandage were out of date and they were going to go in the bin, so I nabbed them. And because it's a medical appliance, they simply can't use it, even though there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. So I have a box of plaster bandage, one of the best acquisitions I've had. There's about a third of it left now, but it's saved me a hell of a lot of money over the years. But the principles are the same. It comes out in strips rather than the rolls that you would buy from a model shop, but it's exactly the same stuff. So I cut it into useful size squares, rectangles, what have you. And some big ones and some thin ones, and then you can select your pieces, cut some into like little squares, fill in the little gaps. The really skinny ones, the end of that embankment, not very high at all. So that'll probably do for starters. Right, so now the messy job starts. I've got a dish with warm, lukewarm water in. We just get our piece of bandage and dip it in the water. Try not to get too many drips all over everything. and just start laying that over, remembering that we've got a baseboard joint here. We don't want to cross the baseboard joint. And then I tend to overlap by about 50% per piece. And then we can start to just rub it in to create a nice smooth surface. Once it starts to go off, it gets nice and creamy, so you can just smooth it off with the creamy plaster of Paris once it starts activating. So there we are. Bottom yard's actually starting to look like it's embedded in the landscape. All the plaster work is done. Made sure we've made some little cuts where the baseboard joins are going to be. We can separate it in future all along the embankment. Up to where the scenery starts again. Right, so the plaster's all set now. We're just going to give it a cheap coat of this cheap emulsion. It's a beigey brown colour. So there we are, that's the groundwork for the lower yard completed. The embankment's all painted up. Lower yard sloping gently off the access road. I don't think I gave you any decent shots. There's the stonework on the edge of the platform from the southeastern fine cast plastic sheet. I have completed the weighbridge building. There'll be a video coming up on me doing that shortly. I just need to get it edited. I've painted those buffer stops, the ones made from the old iron mink bodies. I've yet to paint the slate retaining wall. That continues all the way down, neatly blended in around this area, which will have a water tower, and down the end to the signal box. A view up from the other end. There we are. I haven't of note, I mentioned I was going to do it. I was going to put some retaining sleepers at the back of the platform. I haven't done that. I'll explain why in a minute. And I've yet to scribe the stone into this area of retaining stonework here. The reason why I haven't completed that yet is I think my next job is over the back of the cliff here. I think it's about time to get some greenery and fencing along there. I don't want to damage too much in the foreground, leaning over it doing that job, because it's a lean of about 2.5 to 3 feet. So there's a fence that runs along the back there from behind the station building right up to the other end of the layout, a distance of probably about 22-23 feet. So that's an awful lot of fencing to sort out, but I think I want to get that done so that I can move on to more details in the mid-ground without damaging it leaning over. Most of these buildings will come up, so I won't damage them leaning over. So don't forget to hit subscribe. Look out for a new video on this little weighbridge building, and I'll leave it there for now.